Welcome to episode 16 of Open Books with Alana and Erin, two female leaders modernizing the accounting and leadership space. Today's topic, time-consuming topic. Servant leadership can be considered probably one of the most, if not the most time-consuming styles of leadership that's out there.
Yep.
And if you're in an industry like the accounting industry where you sell time, basically, this can be very hard for upper management to be okay with. It can be very hard for team members or even like middle management to accept that as something that they need to do.
Yep.
So we kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Anything that takes away from your quote unquote billable time has been viewed, I would consider, somewhat negatively in this space. So we kind of want to talk about that. Starting off, in what ways would you consider servant leadership time consuming?
Well, to piggyback on how you opened the podcast, specifically for public accounting, that's why we shouldn't be billing by the hour. But that's another episode.
Preach.
How is servant leadership time consuming? For me, I view it as servant leadership is just an investment, period, and not a short-term investment. It requires time for conversations, for support. It requires time for you to communicate on, challenges or decisions. All of that does take time for sure. I view it as like just a slow climb every day to continue building your team, because it is not a fast style by any means. You are not making a decision and just like continuing on with your day.
Right.
There is more visibility and transparency, I would say, in servant leadership. And to actually have that transparency, you have to take time to be transparent. And that's not quick.
It's the meetings alone.
Oof.
I remember when I first joined the firm I proposed, like, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to have one-on-ones with the team members every week.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're meeting this many times. And I think it originally took the current executive team, it took them aback a little bit. Like, okay, we aren't totally sure how this is going to work.
Yep.
But okay, we trust you. You've worked in the industry for a long time. So like, okay, you do what you want to do. But they were not afraid to question me about that. And so for me, it was like, we're starting off meetings. That in itself is just time consuming for everyone involved, especially as someone who was instigating sounds wrong, but it's the right word. Hosting them. So I had like meeting prep time and meeting after time to make sure that I was processing what we all discussed.
Yep.
And all of that was in an end to be more transparent, to have more collaboration, to have more consensus, which I think is huge.
Yeah.
And that is just time consuming. And it's hard. It was hard to get the team to be okay with that as well, because then they saw their billable time take a dip, which like we aren't even we don't rank people based on productivity. So it wasn't even something that's going to affect their review or their pay or anything.
Yep.
But they still had that worry, I think, because of the industry itself, and any other industry that sells time would be the same, is going to see that and be like, oh crap, that's a lot of time that I'm now devoting to quote unquote talking.
Yeah.
When it's really so much more than that.
And it is so much more than that, in the sense of, yes, on a day-to-day basis and in the long run, servant leadership takes longer. There's no doubt about that. But I also look at it as, yes, it takes longer on the day-to-day, but we are actually skirting some major issues
Yeah.
that probably would really be detrimental
Mm-hmm.
to our operations if we didn't have it in place.
Yeah.
You know, we have crazy burnout. People leave even with servant leadership
Mm-hmm.
just because of the way the world is currently. And so if we weren't providing this type of leadership style, it would be, I feel like, so much faster for those elements and things to come into play
Mm-hmm.
in the business.
So, as you mentioned, burnout,
Yeah.
it's very easy, I think, for team leaders to experience a lot of time crunch
Mhm.
between trying to support and manage their team versus the client work from external leadership. I
Yeah.
think we also have it internally, which
Yep.
is like the next topic. But how do you currently handle that crunch expectation from your upper management?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of feeds back to what you talked about with one-on-ones is I think you have to show or demonstrate that what you're doing, the meetings, those time-consuming activities provide value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it matters that you are holding effective meetings and that you're finding that you're creating that really trusting and strong relationship with each team member, and that you're able to show, because of this that I've created with my team, here are the impacts. We're moving faster. You know, our team is very strong.
Yeah.
We're providing great service. The team is open to bringing up ideas, to pitching, you know, new items coming up, or
Yeah.
talking through challenges. We're learning from each other. All those items just feed back to, yes, one-on-ones take a lot of time, because they never go just the intended amount of time.
No.
Right? And you have the prep and the, you know, after the fact evaluation, but being able to point back to those servant leadership methods, I think is really important to show the effectiveness of them.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would say the same thing. Being
Yeah.
able to show the results
Yeah.
of what you're doing is probably the best way to try to manage that crunch or that expectation.
Yeah.
And I think you see that a lot in traditional firms, of where like you're expected to manage a book of a certain clients and
Yeah.
then also manage a team of a certain amount. And that's hard. Then you have the pressure from above saying like, hey, you have to do both of these, but servant leadership is so time consuming. So showing the results, showing the engagement with your team. We will talk in a future episode kind of about more of the results and how you measure the results of servant leadership. But I think a lot of the industry is going to require some type of proof, examples, results, and that could be that this employee is still with us and still working and still happy in their job and not looking anywhere else. Like, that is a result, because it's so much more expensive and it's harder, especially now with the incoming shortage, to find the right fit of an employee. So that's kind of how I have dealt with it. I would say I'm very lucky in that my executive team is very supportive and involve themselves a lot in the team, which is easy to do when you're pretty small like we are. But you know, getting their support is huge.
And I think, you know, you touched on the future episode that we'll have. What I was just thinking is, if you've only seen servant leadership, I think you take for granted the results that come out of it.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to identify that these are a result of servant leadership, just because you're so used to it.
Yeah.
Right? And so that episode will be interesting to talk about what are results of servant leadership, because then you can, for other leaders out there, you can relate it back to, okay, because, you know, I'm following servant leadership, here's what we are seeing.
Right.
And you can use that to support then the methods that you're deploying.
Totally. It's I think it's very hard to measure like the contentedness
Yeah,
of the team,
totally.
but it's such a result. So we'll talk about hopefully how to
Yep.
like put that into some quantitative metric. We'll see if we're successful or not.
We'll work on that one for a
Yeah.
while.
So I know something that I definitely experienced kind of shifting into the servant leadership method / style, whatever you want to call it, technique. I, because I'd come up in the public accounting career for, many years, well, it was drilled into me that your value is based on the client work that you perform.
Yeah.
So that has definitely been, not only have I don't see the pressure from upper management now, but have in the past. Had that external pressure, but then there was a lot of internal pressure on my own of how do I actually be successful in this? I know what kind of management or manager I want to be for this team, but how do I reconcile that with my own self, not considering external factors? And that was really hard for me to do. And it was a lot of therapy, as we talked about in our last episode. But I know for me, it was like making that true decision that my passion lay with the team and making them better. And their success was in turn my success. And I had to just let go of that ego and seeing my value as the client work. And that was hard and took years to be okay with. How do you handle kind of that internal pressure? Or do you not feel it at all?
No, I feel it. Yeah, I feel it. And I think for me, I feel it too, because when you start out in any industry like accounting, you start with the client work. That's how you build your technical skill. And as you progress, you start to get more complex engagements and more complex clients, and your knowledge just continues to grow in a very technical way. And that's kind of what you're putting into your, tool bag of items, is that technical work. And then you turn into a leader and you kind of have to back off that technical work.
Yes.
And we've talked about that before, of like the technical work is clear, right? There's an answer that you're looking for. There's a result you're looking for. And the leadership side can be more fuzzy because, like we talked about, you're dealing with people. That's a complex thing, right? And so I think acknowledging that I have a passion for accounting and the technical side, and that's really what drew me into public accounting. I think just acknowledging that and knowing that that's a balance I have to help obtain for myself is important, to just even acknowledge that. But what I found is I have such a passion for leadership. And I think for me now, that passion for leadership and the desire to just want to learn more and apply it in public accounting, but just in general, applying it has now started to really, like, not drive out the accounting side by any means, because I'm in public accounting, but it definitely gives it a run for its money in the sense that I'm very passionate about both things. And I'm very lucky that on a daily basis, I get to do both.
Yeah.
Like, it really is kind of the perfect situation. But all that to say, how do I manage it? I just acknowledge that I have a passion for both. And I prioritize things based on just what has to get done.
Yeah.
And I think especially in public accounting, where there are due dates and such, sometimes you have to focus on those technical due dates. And then when those let up, you're able to, refocus and prioritize the leadership side of things.
Yeah.
I would say.
We recently met, like the leadership team at the firm I'm at, met for about a week, and just kind of thinking about the time-consuming nature of servant leadership. The vast majority of that week was spent talking about the team and how we're managing them, like how are we leading them to grow, and are we providing enough support? But one of the topics was having to let go of some of the client work that we were still doing. And at the time, like, it's I've gotten to the point where my ego isn't quite as tied into the
Yeah.
client work,
Yep.
but I still really enjoy it.
No.
And there's so much satisfaction from like doing something technically complex and having it come out perfect, like your balance sheets fully reconciled and you're just like perfect.
Yes.
It's ready to go to tax
Yep.
prep or it's ready to go to audit or
Yep.
whatever. And just like being so happy and
Yeah.
content with that. But then also acknowledging, like we did in this meeting, was to really provide the right support for the team.
Yep.
We have to let go of it.
Yeah.
And that was hard, but we kept like thinking back to when we promoted our 2 team members and the feeling of fulfillment and happiness we felt about being able to do that.
Yeah.
And just like I still get that same like rush of endorphins or
Yeah.
serotonin, but it's more coming from the success of the team rather than my own like technical accomplishments.
Yeah.
And that was hard. It was hard for all 3 of us to like be okay with that.
Yep.
But it has to happen so that we can be better for our team.
Yeah, because you can't do everything.
Right.
Like there's just no possible way to be a really impactful and effective leader and I mean have a full load of client work.
Right.
But I think that's also where servant leadership comes in that you have to lean on other team members because so if you're focusing on the leadership things, you are still in your role as a leader having to oversee the technical side of work of your employees, right? And so you may not be consistently working in the software that they're working in, but it might still fall in your purview to evaluate the software that we're in and find a new software if needed. And so I think that's where you have to put your ego aside, lean on servant leadership, and allow other team members to bring up ideas, talk to you about the challenges they're having on the technical side, being open to hearing that, and then working with them to find a solution.
Yeah.
That's not fast at all.
No.
But like I said, better in the long run, and it has to be addressed. And like I said, you have to be open to leaning on team members like that.
I'm so glad you said that because it's so true. A lot of us like to are very proud of our technical skills that we've built over the years. And it can be hard to let go of being the subject matter expert.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But we truly, like, you as one individual cannot be the subject matter expert in everything. And that's one thing that's super hard for me to let go of, to be like, okay, actually, you need to talk to this person who has the time and the ability and the passion to dig into this topic that I may have really loved earlier in my career.
Right.
So again, we had to drop a bit of that ego.
Or to that effect, like even acknowledging like, I used to do that. My knowledge is really outdated now.
Yeah.
And so just knowing like, I don't know what the newest thing is for this.
Yeah.
Help. Like I need my team to help me with that. And that's what's been hard for me is like, I did this so many years ago. Oh, that has totally changed since then. You know, and not being that person who's like, well, we did it this way and like continue doing it that way, but allowing things to adapt and evolve that probably supersede your knowledge, sometimes your ability, and being okay with that is important.
And it kind of circling back to the time consuming nature.
Yeah.
That mentorship of bringing those people up to be those subject matter experts, it does not happen overnight.
No.
And I think as accountants, we second guess ourselves a lot. They need support. They need encouragement. Sometimes they might need guidance on what they even want to be a subject matter expert in.
Yep.
I have found that that's like the biggest longest topics of conversation that I've had, that goes through all of our like quarterly evals, our one-on-ones, like finding where this person's passion is, and just working with them. And then like, okay, well maybe that's the passion for a little bit, but they want to change it, but it's time consuming.
Yeah.
But that's okay because they are going to be so much happier with what they're doing and where they're moving in their career. And they're going to be a much happier employee and team member. And it all kind of feeds together to make the end result a great working environment.
Yeah, you had touched in the beginning of the episode how the meetings are the take the longest in servant leadership. And I guess maybe not necessarily the meetings, but just the coaching in general. That mentorship. The coaching is not a quick thing to do by any means, but the coaching is done in the meetings and, you know, the side conversations that are had. And that takes a long time because you first have to establish a really strong relationship with that employee so that they feel supported in the coaching. And it just matters what you're doing every day to support that relationship and feed into the coaching of that employee.
And you never know how long building that trust will take. Some employees, it might be quick. They may be used to working in an environment where they are supported and can trust their leadership, or they may come from a really antagonistic place and it may take them a long time to let those walls down. It's been interesting. We have had new people start. One is kind of brand new out of college with one job under their belt, and then another person who's much further along in their career. And the differences in how they've started to kind of open up and build that trust has been very interesting to watch. Time consuming both ways, but so different as well. But that's okay. Like, that's what I'm here for. It can be time consuming, and that's all right. And executive leadership is okay with that. And I think that's the hugest part, just having the support from the executive leadership or, you know, some support somewhere in the firm that understands why it's time consuming and the benefits of it being time consuming.
Totally. Alternatively, I would say if somebody is at a place where, you know, they're bringing forward servant leadership, I would say just keep marching to that drum that, you know, creates results, because it, you know, takes one person to start creating change. So yeah, in a perfect world, it's really great to have full support, and that's really what you strive for. But I would say, you know, you can also choose the type of leader that you want to be. And so just focus on the results to prove what servant leadership can do.
So not to interrupt you, but I think you are like the perfect example of this. Because I think we had our mentor kind of start out in the firm as this servant leadership style, and having watched from outside, like him kind of change things, and then you and another coworker kind of change some things, and now seeing it trickle to your team as well is not something I would have expected. Just knowing the firm, and you guys are big, so there's a lot of management at lots of different levels. So it can be done. Totally. You don't have to be a small firm like mine. It may not start from the tippy top, but you can start and it kind of just grows.
It totally does.
It's been beautiful to watch.
Just stick with it. It will. It does create change for sure.
Frustrating at times, but what isn't frustrating at times?
Totally.
But the results are so well worth it.
Totally worth it.
Both for your own like personal mental health, and the results for the firm as well.
I totally agree. What's something in regards to the time investment that servant leadership takes? What's something that you've learned from team member or mentor in that regard?
So I think the most important thing I've learned is that the time is worth it. What time it takes is worth it, even if it takes 2 years or longer to build trust and support and rapport with a team member. In the end, it's worth it. I may have bragged about this before, but I remember on like my 1 year annual review with the executive team, they had shared that one employee was like, the fact that we do weekly one-on-ones has changed my career and my personal life for the better. And that was like openly weeping. It was like the best thing that I, as a still learning servant leader, could hear. And the fact that it made so much of an impression on them to share that with upper management, and it just reinforced everything that this was how I wanted to lead. It was changing things for my team for the better. And so it really reinforced that the time is worth it. It's probably the biggest thing I've learned. Also from my mentor, who spent the time with me to learn from him and how he did things. And it was time consuming for him, and he was an extremely busy individual. And the fact that he took the time to spend that with me, it changed my personal life and my professional life. And the time is worth it. It probably is my biggest thing I've learned from mentors, team members, colleagues by far. How about yours?
It is pretty similar in that the time is worth it. What I would say, even in the moments of when there isn't a scheduled one-on-one or, scheduled team meeting, but in the moments of something blew up for someone and they're coming to you, that's the time to completely put things aside and support that employee, coach them through it. That time is not a waste of time. And just that messaging of not being too busy to help someone through that, because it would be quicker to, in the moment, probably to get frustrated, fix it for them, tell them we're going to talk about it later, and then you can get back to your work. That doesn't pay off in the long run. And so just reminding yourself that the time is important. As a leader, the greatest work you'll do is supporting your team. And so just reminding myself of that's the biggest role you have as a leader.
That I know we're running out of time, but one we should talk about in the future is that perception of being busy. It is very easy for us to give off, especially servant leaders who have a lot of meetings, for the team to get the impression that we are too busy. And you have to work against that, like reinforce it, because they will see all the stuff on your calendar and be like, oh, they're too busy for this. Or especially in the middle of tax time, like, no, they're too busy. But something we should talk about in the future, because I think it has a potentially negative effect and makes them less willing to trust. But
totally.
Awesome. Good. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning into Open Books. We aim to share insights gained from our past and future experiences to foster growth within the leadership and accounting communities. See you next time.